she'd gone out like a lot of people would do for an evening out with colleagues to have a nice time. And sadly, obviously, we know that she went missing. Now, there was a very highly publicised appeal for information on where she may have been. Police made intensive inquiries, and we know that her body was going to be discovered on Christmas Day. So she was born on the 19th of April 1985, and her parents were David and Teresa Yeates, and they are from Hampshire. She had actually received a private education. So in the UK, I know it's very different in the US, but in the UK, our education is provided to us and our children through the government, and they have government funded, and then they go privately funded, but they're sort of funded and we don't pay for schooling. However, for a private school, you would be looking at paying a lot of money, and that is the kind of education that Joanna had received, which is, you know, for more fortunate children, I guess, going to private education, because obviously you're paying privately and you're getting a higher standard of care and education, because obviously with our state funded type schools, they're very overcrowded and the education isn't always the best. So if you have parents that can do that, that would put you in a very fortunate place if you are in the UK. But I know in America, education is funded for by the parents, I believe, and it's very expensive. I know from when my brother was paying for his stepdaughter's schooling, it was insane, the amount that they paid. So she studied A-levels and she graduated with a degree in landscape architecture from Writtle College, and she received a postgraduate diploma in landscape architecture from the University of Gloucestershire. Now, in December 2008, Joanna met 25-year-old architect Greg Reardon at the firm of Highland Edgar, and that is when they settled to Bristol. They moved there together. Joanna changed her jobs and then went from a job she went to a job to work at Building Design Partnership in Bristol. So there's not many women that would take on that kind of a job, I don't think. So I think it's very, it is really interesting, and obviously perhaps her education has probably taken her down that and been able to take her down that route. And obviously if you go to university in the UK, you do end up having to pay that back. Now, back when I done my first degree, the way it works is when I did it, I'm not so sure now, but when I did it, I qualified in 2004. Well, I got my bachelor's in 2004 in psychology. And if you got a job that earned over a certain amount, then you would start paying it back. And then until you earn that amount, you don't pay it back. But I think there's probably been some changes in that. But obviously doing building design, probably earning a very good income from that. So they moved to a flat on 44 Canyon Road, and that was a large house that had been subdivided into several flats, and there's quite a few of those across the UK. Our housing is very small in the UK and very crammed in, and if you're in an older property, you're more likely to have more land and space, but as the newer ones go up, you are literally, you could walk from your door into the neighbours. That's how close they build these things. So it's very common for older buildings that are quite big to be converted into flats and things, because then obviously the owner of the home can earn more money from rent by subdividing it between multiple tenants. So they moved in there in the October. So on the 19th of December at 8 o'clock, Greg returned home from a weekend visit to Sheffield where he found Joanna was missing from their flat. He had actually been trying to contact her by phone and text, and he hadn't been able to successfully get hold of her. So while waiting for Joanna to return, he calls her mobile phone again, and the phone rings from the pocket of her coat. So that is going to be a massive concern, isn't it? When your girlfriend's phone is ringing in her pocket and she isn't there, and you haven't been able to get hold of her in the entire time that you are away. So he then finds that her purse and her keys are in the flat, and that's never good either. And that the cat flap that they have had been neglected, or the cat, appeared. I don't know where I think I put the word flat and cat and came up with cat flap. The cat appeared to have been neglected shortly after midnight, and that would be very unusual for Joanna to neglect their cat. After midnight, around midnight, Greg calls the police, and he then informs her parents. I don't know whether he rang to inform them she was missing, or rang to inform them or ask them if they knew anything, because I mean there's a very good chance that they could know something, I guess. And during the investigation, now with missing persons, obviously every person has got the right to disappear if they want to. So missing persons is really difficult to get off the ground at the best of times, especially when they are adults. But they know that on the 17th of December, she was last known at the Bristol Ram pub with her colleagues, and she left, it said, at around 8 p.m. on that evening. And her walk from that pub was a 30-minute walk, apparently. That's quite a walk, isn't it? By yourself. I know it was only 8 p.m, but it's 8 p.m. in December. It's cold. It's a 30-minute walk. I don't know the area. Is it built up? Is it rural? Is there like loads of gaps where you wouldn't be walking past, I don't know, someone's home? That would be obviously interesting to know that, because obviously with points like that, you know, it is very dangerous to walk home. If I'm out and I know I'm going to be on my own, I do not go anywhere where there's nowhere, if I needed to, shout, scream, run, bang on a door. Hi, Marion. Like, there's nowhere I wouldn't take that route. So normally I like to take the grandbaby into the little woods up the road, but I would never do that now at this time of year. It's dark, it's cold, and I would just be screaming out if I was on my own that I'm vulnerable, and there is not one person that would hear me there either. Even though it's only literally a very small little wander up the road, no one would know that I was there. Unless, obviously, Mrs. After Dark would know, because I'd tell her, wouldn't I? But Michelle snuck in there, and she wasn't the first one in here tonight. So, anyway, she takes that 30-minute walk home. It's dark. She's on her own. And she's a very beautiful young lady, as you can see. She told her friends and colleagues that she was not looking forward to spending that weekend on her own, because obviously her boyfriend wasn't there, he was away, and it was the first time alone in her flat, and she just wasn't looking forward to it. So she said that she was going to do some baking, obviously because it's the build up to Christmas, you know, put some Christmas tunes on, do a bit of Christmas baking, because they had planned to be throwing a party the following week. And they also wanted to do some Christmas shopping, so they had time. So just getting organised for that Christmas period, and that's what her plans were. Now, prior to obviously him coming back and finding that she was missing, when they go through all of the CCTV clips and everything, they see her on a closed circuit television at around 8:10 p.m, leaving the Waitrose supermarket. And this is without purchasing anything. So she could have, I mean, I don't know if she smoked or anything. She could have been getting tobacco. But it's very odd to go into a supermarket and then perhaps not buy anything. Usually if you're going to stop in, you need something. And unless they didn't have it because it was the 17th of December, you know what it's like. Bloody shops are bare. Can we get a tin of, a box of Heroes Love for Money? Not at the moment. They've all gone. All they've got is Quality Streets. And who likes Quality Streets? Not me. So if you leave it too late, you snooze, you lose. So she could have been looking for something and they didn't have it. So she then phones her best friend called Rebecca Scott at 8:30 to arrange a meeting on Christmas Eve. The last known footage that is recorded of Joanna is her buying a pizza from a branch of Tesco Express at around 8:40. So that is probably what she may have gone in to get from the Waitrose supermarket, but maybe they didn't have the one she wanted, so she stopped off at the Tesco's Express. So for those of you, Tesco's is a bit like your Walmart in America. She also bought 2 small bottles of cider at a nearby off-licence called the Bargain Booze. Now, Greg and Joanna's friends set up a website that used social networking services to help look for her, even on the 21st of December. Now, Joanna's parents and Greg go on to make a public appeal for her safe return. That was done very quickly. Thank you, Michelle. Now, this press conference was broadcast live on the 23rd of December by Sky News, our very own Sky News and BBC News. And that is right on the eve of Christmas, isn't it? The 23rd. So that's like tomorrow that they put that appeal out there. And Joanna's dad comments on her disappearance, and he says, I think she was abducted after getting home to her flat. I've no idea the circumstances on her abduction because what was left behind, I feel sure she would not have gone out leaving all of these things behind that she was taken. So all the things she bought to have back at her property and her flat were there, including obviously her phone and her bag, it seems. Detectives found no sign of the pizza that she had bought or its packaging. But the bottles of cider were there. One was partially consumed, but there was no sign of a forced entry either, or a struggle. And investigators began to examine the possibility that she may have been known by her abductor. So, of course, I guess the first place they're going to go is her parents and then her boyfriend, because they live together. Obviously, her parents, they will interview everyone that's known to her, friends, anyone that's close to her that could know anything is where they would normally start. But I imagine it will have started with the boyfriend quite quickly, especially as there was no forced signs of entry going into that flat. It's weird that the drink was there, partially had been drunk, and then the food or the pizza wasn't there. That's weird. So there is no signs of a struggle. She may be known by her abductor. And is it by someone that has access to the property? So on December the 25th at 9 a.m, sadly, a local couple were walking their dog and they discover that there is a fully clothed woman's body lying on the roadside verge in the snow of Longwood Lane near a golf course next to the entrance of a quarry in the UK. in Fayland in the UK, and this is approximately 3 miles. So for those of you doing kilometres, it's 4.8 kilometres from her flat, from her home. So not far at all. On the 26th of December, the police believe the woman is Joanna Yeates. However, due to her frozen remains, the post-mortem took longer to complete. On December the 28th, the police reveal that this is Joanna Yeates and she had been strangled, and a murder investigation is launched called Operation Braid. Now, I don't know about you guys in America, but in the UK, we come up with names for various different cases, and this one was called Operation Braid. Now, on the 30th of December, police arrest Chris Jeffries at his flat on suspicion of the murder of Joanna Yeates. His silver Chrysler car is removed by the police from the road outside of the property. By the 31st of December, police have been granted more time to interview him, and that kind of is what happens in the UK. You get so long and then you have to apply for an extended amount of time, if it's warranted, to carry on with the police interview. You need to charge them or kind of let them go. On January the 1st, 2011, Joanna's family and her boyfriend, they issue a statement paying a tribute to Joanna, and they obviously express how devastated they are, and that she is very talented and obviously very beautiful to them. She's their daughter, and in this they talk about how she has been stolen from them, and she was stolen from them at Christmas. They also say during this statement that they remain convinced that the police will find out who did this. On January the 4th, it moves quite quickly, police launch a Facebook campaign to find the person responsible for Joanna's unaliving, and as they called it, there's no other way, a Christmas murder hunt was underway, and it captured the British press. We all know the press like to get involved, don't we, as well? And they were eager to help find who did this as well to Joanna. And quite frankly, at the time, the police needed their help, and they were baffled because as they were going through and doing their investigations, important items like her coat, her boots, keys, purse and mobile were all left at the flat, and they weren't on her person. And then we go back to, there is no signs of a struggle or forced entry into the flat she lived in. So they then appeal for more information for people to come forward, and Chris Jeffries, who is the landlord, was reported to have told the police he'd seen 3 people, including Joanna, leaving her flat on the night she vanished. Now, this is her landlord. What do you think about this man? Don't be judgy. Don't be judgy, but what do you think? Good, no one's being judgy. So that's the landlord. He looks wired, doesn't he? But nothing is as it seems. But nothing ever is in a crime, is it? Nope, not today. Like that. I like that name. So this is her landlord, Chris Jeffries. Now, he's the one that says that there was people coming in and out of the flat free, including her. Now, on December the 30th, he is the first person that is arrested in this case on suspicion of Joanna Yeates' murder. Now, the British press also at this point now begin to believe that he is the killer and began to have a campaign to vilify him. His silver Chrysler car, we know, was taken for investigation, and this appeared to verify his guilt. Now, on New Year's Eve, police were given more time to question him, but on New Year's Day, he was actually released on bail. So obviously, they didn't have enough to hold him and they didn't have enough to charge him any further. And it took the police until March the 4th to release him from police bail without charge. Yep. As I said, nothing is as it seems. And in this case, the British press went to vilify him, which is one of the reasons why it's very difficult with this whole innocent until proven guilty. So, after searching for clues and leads, police notice that there's some similarities between the unaliving of Joanna and the unaliving of Glenys Carruthers in 1974. She was also strangled after leaving a party in Clifton, but they found nothing to link the cases together. On the 5th of January, the police released news that they were trying to locate a grey sock missing from Joanna's body, and they believed that the sock and the pizza could hold vital clues to solving the case. Already reaching out to the public via the internet using Facebook and the YouTube, the police turned to BBC's Crime Watch on the 18th of January to try and help solve this case. A month since her death, Joanna's final footsteps were being retraced by an actress. Events of the previous day had seen Joanna's parents make an emotional plea for armchair detectives to come forward with any information. Let me read that to you again for all the armchair haters. Events of the previous day had seen Joanna's parents make an emotional plea for armchair detectives to come forward with information. Yep. FYI. Following the discovery of Joanna's body, detectives from the Avon and Somerset Constabulary issue an appeal for anyone with information about her death to come forward and investigate, and they begin to investigate similarities with other unsolved cases, and that is the one we know of Glenys Carruthers, I think it's Carruthers, and Melanie Hall, who was 25, who disappeared in 1996, and whose body was discovered 13 years later. Claudia Lawrence went missing in 2009. Investigators identify striking similarities between Joanna's case, Hall case, and the Hall case, notably their age and appearance, because we know that Melanie Hall was age 25. And they both disappeared after returning home from a meeting with friends, but there is a possibility of such connections which was played down by authorities, so I don't know what they are. The police gathered all the surveillance cameras from Clifton Suspension Bridge, which forms part of the most direct route from the crime scene to the Clifton suburb where Yeates was last seen alive. Now, the footage was really poor quality, and I imagine back then it probably was, making it impossible to clearly distinguish between the individuals, or a car registration plate, which, we know that's very important as a car registration plate. And if the person who has done this is driving that car, that's a key piece of information that they can get from this CCTV. But I can guess as well, but 2010 ain't that long ago, but it's long enough that CCTV has come on a long way from then. Investigators were aware that the perpetrator could have used, obviously, an alternative bridge. And we know that they can change their car, change their license plate and that kind of thing. So there's always that possibility. Now, they could have obviously used an alternative bridge across that River Avon, which would avoid any CCTV coverage about a mile south further down. So while all that's going on and the investigation is underway, a post-mortem on Joanna, we know, was carried out on the 26th of December. The results were delayed, we know, because she was frozen. She was frozen because obviously in the UK it's cold, and sometimes around this time of year, not all the time, because it's not frosty bitey at this time of the year now as we speak, but back then it may well have been. They said that her body showed no signs of visible injury, but it became a murder inquiry, and we know she died of strangulation. And she'd been deceased for several days before her remains were found by those dog walkers. So the main thing here seems to be the strangulation. There doesn't seem to be any other visible wounds or injuries at that time when they carried out the autopsy. Now, also important to note is that according to the autopsy, if you're eating and you don't want to hear, don't swipey out. She did not eat the pizza. So the pizza wasn't in the room. The pizza wasn't inside her stomach. But there was no evidence either that she had been SA'd. So it's a bit of a bizarre one. Because it doesn't seem like anything of importance was stolen either. Now, the police searched Greg's laptop and mobile phone as part of their standard procedure, which is what I said at the beginning. They needed to rule him out because he lived there. He's the first go-to, especially where there's no forced entry. He's the first person that is going to be grilled. Now, a young woman attending a party at a neighbouring house on Canyon Road on the night of Joanna's disappearance recalls hearing 2 loud screams, and shortly after 9 p.m, this is when she says that she heard this, and this was in the direction of Joanna's flat. Another neighbour living behind where Joanna lived said that she heard a woman scream, "Help me." Did anyone ring 911, just out of interest? Although they could not recall exactly when the incident occurred. So it doesn't sound like, despite hearing that, no one called 911. Officers removed the front door to Joanna's flat to check for clothing fibres and DNA. And investigators examined the possibility that the perpetrator had entered the flat before Joanna had gotten home. Thank you, Harmony. Welcome to our team. Shortly after 7 a.m. on the 30th of December, We know that Christopher Jeffries, this guy here, is in another flat, and he lives in that flat, in that building. Thank you, and welcome to the team. And we know he is initially arrested, and it takes them until March to free him. Now, the extension in December that they got granted was for 12 hours. 12 hours is nothing in a case of this magnitude. Yeah, what did they say? Oh, did I miss the rude comment? I missed the rude comment. So 12 hours, like I said, is nothing. They did hold him for more questioning. They applied to what we call the magistrates court for an extension to be able to do that. And they have up to 96 hours, but they let him out on bail. And then by March, he's released of that. He also receives an apology from the constabulary for the distress that this has caused him. And rightly so when he's innocent, because the press went after him and vilified him as well. And this is why we have to be so careful when we're talking about these cases, that we have to always say it's alleged until it's proven either way in a court of law, because this man was on the police books until March of 2011. That's a long time to have that over your head and people watching you and accusing you and you being vilified when you may not have done anything. So that's why, for example, yesterday with a mass shooting, I didn't reveal the details of the person. I had them, but I didn't reveal them in case they were wrong. And so we have to be very careful. Because looking at this guy, you would get the impression just from looking at him that possibly that he might have something to do with it, because he looks scared. It's scary to me. And he looks like he would have some odd characteristics. So that is why we have to be careful. However, on the morning of the 20th of January, so even though on the morning of 20th of January, Avon and Somerset Constabulary arrest a 32-year-old architectural engineer. Now remember what Joanna does for a living. Vincent Tabak, and he lives with his girlfriend in the flat next door to Joanna. And at the time, the authorities declined to reveal any additional information on that suspect, even though he was being interrogated. There was controversial social media coverage on this guy's arrest, and this breached the rules governing what could and couldn't be reported. And then they'd obviously arrested this man, which is Vincent Tabak, and that's him. That's the guy that they then arrest. Can't really see his face very well on there. Thank you. It's the universe. Okay, so Vincent was arrested following an anonymous tip from a female caller. Wonder if that was his partner. Shortly after the televised appeal by Joanna's parents on Crime Watch. I think you guys get Crime Watch in the US, don't you? I think you do. I think it's something that you do get as well. So Canyon Road was closed by police while the scaffolding was constructed around Joanna's home, and officers sealed off Vincent's adjacent flat and they continued to search the nearby townhouses of a friend where Vincent was believed to have been staying. This was just a mile away, so bear in mind, Joanna was found 3 miles from where she lived. He had been in and around the friend a mile away, and then there's their home, so not very far at all. Makes me wonder who obviously the Crime Watch calls and that are what's the word I'm looking for? Confidential. But makes me wonder, like, did the other half have an inkling? So initially, in the very, very beginning, they'd actually ruled Vincent out of the case in the earlier parts when this started, because they say he had returned back to the UK from a holiday to visit his family in the Netherlands. So if you guys know the Netherlands and the UK, depending on where you are in the UK, the further south you are, the closer you are. But the Netherlands is a very short flight. You can hop on and you could hop backwards and forwards to the Netherlands a couple of times in a day. The only thing that would probably delay you is the actual time that you wait at the airport after checking in, because you have to check in, you have 2 hours, so the flights go when the flights go. But yeah, the Netherlands is quite not too far away. I wonder how tall he is, because all the Dutch are really tall. I'm supposed to have Dutch in my bloodlines, but I'm short as they come. So after Vincent Tabak was arrested, the BBC then cancels its plan to air the reenactment on Crime Watch. We do reenactments over here. Don't know if you do them so much in the US, but we do them here. And this was on the 31st of January. And they had previous unseen photos of Joanna, and they put this through the programme's website. So let's just relocate Joanna, because we don't really want to look at them scary eyes. So this is another picture, and this is just them grabbing stuff from the property. That's Cora on the way to chemo, by the way. Just thought I'd show. And then this is a different photo. But this is the most common one that we see. The one that most people can relate is to that being Joanna Yeates. So DNA tests were carried out, because at this point in our years we do have DNA testing, and this was carried out by a private company which undertakes forensic analysis for criminal investigations. And Lindsay Lennon, a bodily fluids and DNA specialist, analyses the samples from Joanna's body and swabs from Vincent, but they were not sufficient or of sufficient quality to be evaluated. So the team deploys a method known as DNA Sense, which enhances unusable DNA samples through purification and concentration. This is getting sciencey now, guys. And they couldn't say whether the DNA was from the saliva or semen or even touch. But what they could say from doing this was that the probability of it not being a match with Vincent Tabak was less than 1 in a billion. Cora is my little pug. Let me just make sure. Okay. So, from this, we know that Vincent was then arrested. Well, actually, on the 31st of December, they actually went and met Vincent at the Amsterdam Schiphol airport, and they arrest him, and then they continue their interview and their investigations, and from the things he said before, did not match statements and the statements that he was given now. Now, apparently, interestingly enough, Vincent had, before doing this to Joanna, he actually used his computer to research agencies during a business trip that he was having in the UK and the US. So he's been over your side of the pond. And he actually had contact with a lot of sex workers, and he did this by phone. And when they investigated him fully, they found that he had violent internet porn on his computer, and this showed women being controlled by males and showing them being bound and gagged and held by the neck and choked. So what is it with these men that do this? That when they look into them, they have this stuff in their computer. Now, also during the investigation, obviously while they've got him locked up in under Her Majesty's pleasure, they find images of women who bore a very striking resemblance to Joanna. And in one of the scenes that these images were, shows a woman pulling up her pink top, and that exposes her bra and areas. And when Joanna was taken or discovered, so when she was taken but discovered, she was wearing a similar pink top, and the top had been arranged in that way as well. Now, obviously, they go to trial, and they bring the evidence and they argue. So the prosecutor argues that the evidence of Vincent's activities should be provided to the jury, which is right. If it's evidence and it's lawful, it should be provided to the jury, because they need to be able to understand what has gone on. And it might shed, they believed, light on the need to hold women for long enough and the need to take the last breath from them and unalive them. So obviously when your defence and your prosecution are arguing about evidence, what's coming in, what's not coming in, and all that kind of stuff, that was one point that they wanted to have, because they wanted the jury to get a good understanding of what this person is capable of. Kind of a bit like, tailor your business, when you get an indication of what they're like as a person. When the trial is going on, we know poison eye drops lady. Again, you get a bit of a history, you get a bit of a background, because if you're the juror, you want to understand, you want all the evidence, you want to see it all, you want to know what's made this person tick, to get an idea of who they are and are they capable even of doing such a thing. So the fact that they had corn images, well, it turned out after. So he had adult corn, but it also turned out after the trial that corn of children was found on his laptop as well. So I don't understand why that came about after the trial, but apparently that did come after the trial. Now, obviously the evidence must have been stacking up against this guy, because on the 2nd of March in 2015, Vincent decides to plead guilty to possessing more than 100 indecent images of children, and for that, this is scary, guys. For that, he's sentenced 10 months. And this is what would go with what he would get for the murder of Joanna. It's bad, isn't it? 10 months for that. Why is it that those incidences get far less weight behind them? Just 10 months for that. Because he's depraved, and this was to go concurrently against what he was given. Hang on, did I say concurrently? Yes. So he's not even getting it consecutively. He's getting it He's getting it alongside. And this is what makes me angry about the British justice system in a lot of cases like this. We know this guy's gotten away with so much, and he's being punished very, very lightly. Very lightly, as far as I'm concerned. So the trial began in the October, and it was led by Mr. Justice Field. In fact, I think I've seen Mr. Justice Field giving sentencing remarks as of late. And this trial took them about 3 weeks to get through. So some trials can be done very quickly, and some trials can take weeks. So this took 3. And in the trial, it emerges that just after Joanna's disappearance, when the police had knocked on Tabak's door, the things that went on would ultimately be released in that courtroom. And from what went previous to when the police knocked on the door, and to what happened previous, because obviously he got away with this for some time, because they still held Jeffries until March time. Now, during the trial, he was alleged to have appeared quite calm, unlike his girlfriend, who seemed to exhibit signs of extreme concern. Why has she got signs of extreme concern? What role did she play in this? Now, because he'd been ruled out as an initial suspect, this is what allowed him to then go to Holland, because it had been ruled out. Now, I'm no disrespect, Avon and Somerset, but if they're living in that building, in the same building as someone that's been murdered, surely you should be saying don't leave the country. Because, what would have happened if he'd have gone over to Holland and then not returned? Because that could have been an option. But then maybe he thought, well, I'm going to Holland and I'm going to return because I've breezed it, I'm running free, and they're not obviously suspecting me. But he went, he was ruled out. He was allowed to continue his life. In the meantime, Jeffries was getting abuse because he'd been charged. The press made a beeline for him, I guess is the word. And it was actually his girlfriend, Tabak's girlfriend, who'd actually called and snitched on Jeffries. So, these things start to unravel as the information starts to roll out, doesn't it? Why did she call the police on Jeffries? Now, we know the police flew out to Holland to get statements from the pair of them, and there seem to be inconsistencies, which often is the case when you're a liar and you're lying and you're not telling the truth. And as the case continues and the investigation continues, Joanna's parents start to get the information that they rightly deserve. They're getting answers as to what happened to their daughter. And over the Christmas period, it must have been awful. Christmas is bad for a lot of people anyways. But if you seemingly had a nice, happy life and then you're blown this over the Christmas period, so this time of year is going to be scarred for them for the rest of their days. But they learn what happened to Joanna, and what happened is what Tabak told the jury happened. So, you know, you've kind of got to take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because they eliminate information they don't want to give to make them look like the people they are. And they also sometimes embellish that information to make it seem like they're way harder and way out there than they are. So it says, on the night of the 17th of December, Vincent told the jury he walked past Joanna's kitchen window and she invited him in. As they talked, Vincent claims he misread the situation due to a flirty comment that she had made, and he found her attractive that night and had gone to kiss her on the lips. Joanna screamed, and in a bid to silence her, Vincent placed his hand around her neck, and within seconds she had died. Now, the pathologist, Dr. Delaney, reveals that Joanna suffered 43 injuries during the struggle that ended her life. So I don't think it's a case of he just strangled her and she instantly went. If she had the other 43 other injuries during that struggle. He showed photographs to the jury of these injuries, the bruise marks to his neck and chin, her neck and chin even, and there was blood underneath her nose, which when someone dies you can get a nosebleed. And he made the jury aware that the injuries that she had sustained were during her life, when she was living, so when her heart was still beating, because some injuries don't happen once you are dead. We know bruising, for one, doesn't happen post-mortem. He went on to say that Vincent would have essentially watched her struggle to breathe. He was taller than Joanna, and he could have tried to save her if he wanted to, but he didn't. He chose not to, and that meant that Joanna endured a slow and painful death. Now, the defence argues that Vincent panicked, and instead of calling the police, he calmly turned the oven off and took out the pizza. I'm going to be really disturbed if he ate it. He then carried Joanna's body to his flat next door and stored it in a bike cover. He then places her remains in the boot of his car and takes a trip to his local Asda in Bedminster. And this is where fibres that are discovered on Joanna's body indicated that she'd come into contact with Vincent Tabak's black coat and his silver Renault Megane. Now, the jury, consisting of 6 men and 6 women, so it's an equal number, learn and are horrified to hear that after he had killed Joanna, he then texted his girlfriend saying, "Miss you loads. It's boring here without you." And after that, the jury were told that whenever Tabak was alone, he would go online, frantically following the developments of this case, which we know unalivers do this, and unalivers even turn up to the crime scene. He researched refuge collection times. So again, you know, people commit these crimes and they leave a trail. They leave a trail. It's unbelievable. They say that he also looked for body decomposition. That seems to be a common Google search for unalivers. How long does it take a body to decompose? So if you're going to do something like this, don't Google in your search history how long is it going to take a body to decompose, especially on a single episode? Because yes, we Google stuff because we're educating ourselves and we're learning and we're reading about cases, and if you followed the history you would see that it's not just that we're looking to find out how to clear up a crime scene and, you know, how to get away with this and how to get away with that. We're looking at things from a point of view of as to why things are done, how someone was caught, was that evidence enough, and that kind of thing. So yeah, as a random, don't Google stuff like that because it's always going to come back and bite you in the ass. Now, the police would never find what they first believed to be their vital clues. He divulged that he'd used his landlord as the scapegoat, which is Jeffries, which is the guy that looks freaky, and everyone was like, oh my God! And they tried to frame him, tried to frame him for the murder. He fed the police a string of lies to hide his own guilt, and Vincent used the opportunity to apologise for putting Joanna's family through a week of hell, especially in the lead up to Christmas. Now, the jury was sent out on the October, and they came back with a verdict for this man, and had given their verdict within 2 days, and they found him guilty of Joanna's murder by a 10-2 jury verdict. So 10 said yes, guilty, 2 said no. So this is how sucky the UK courts are. He was given a life sentence. Now, over here, life does not actually mean life. Life isn't as you would expect. He would be expected to serve a minimum of 20 years. They called him they referred to this as a sexual crime. The judge says that he's very dangerous. You are deceitful and dishonest and manipulative. And he gets his sentence. But don't forget, running to this, next to this, at the same time as this, he gets a 10-month sentence for all the images he has of child porn on his images and stuff on his phone. Like, what the hell? It's like what? It's crazy. I still can't believe that warrants just 10 months. Just 10 months. And he gets away with that. That's bloody shocking.